introduction. I am so excited because this is your time, women. We are in a very unique time and space. And honestly, if we all step it up a little bit, I think there's going to be some great opportunity for you, for all of us. Honestly, if you look around, there's actually a dearth of leadership. And that's kind of a negative way to start. But in many organizations, there's just not the strong leaders that we need. And in many of our government entities and all of the things, you look around us and we say, who is going to be bold and lead us forward? And so I challenge all of you, to really think about what kind of leader would you like to be? And we can all lead with different styles. And that's why I talk a lot about Myers-Briggs. And we've talked about that with this group several times about knowing your strengths and your weaknesses and what type of strengths can you bring that will be the new breed of leadership that you can bring to the table, that you can bring to anything that you touch. A few years ago, I had the privilege of working with 4 men, actually, this was a long time ago, who had gotten their MBAs at Harvard. And I worked with them in a leadership program that they had put together. They did leadership training, team building. They did faith planning because they were faith-based people, to be honest with you, but they also did strategic planning and they did decision-making modules and many things like that. And one of the people that they would bring in to speak was a wonderful man named Howard Hendricks. If you ever look up Howard Hendricks, he's got a lot of quotes and a lot of great books and stories out there, but he was the chaplain for the Dallas Cowboys, among other things, and just a great, great speaker. And I like some of his quotes. I'm going to read you one of them to start off with this morning, because I want you to think about this as we go through our discussion today. The measure of you as a leader is not what you do, but what others do because of what you do. And that is truly a word of wisdom for us all, because not only do we have to just have our own leadership style and what we're going to do, but how are we influencing others to be leaders? How are we influencing others to be at the top of their game and doing the best that they can do? So think about how you really have a lot more influence than you think, and people are watching you. And I didn't realize that for many years. People would say, Gay, in your company, people watch what you do and what you say, and they're going to emulate what you say and do. Because as leader, we have that responsibility. And what you give back to them is what they're going to take out to their teams. So are we going to show my book slide real quick, Stephanie? Just because we mentioned that. This is my book. It came out a few years ago, but it's evergreen. It doesn't go out of style because the wisdom and stories in there are pretty much the same as it would be 5 years ago or 15 years from now. But the book is called Cowgirl Power, How to Kick Ass in Business and Life. And I have to tell you, that's a little picture of me to the right of the book. That's me as a child in a very small town that I grew up at, Liberty, Texas, about 45 miles from Houston. And my parents were both from Missouri. I am a first-generation Texan. And because I was born in Texas, they decided I was going to be a little Texan. And so this is not a Halloween costume. I dressed like this a lot as a child in Western wear and hats and fringe and the whole bit, and my little red boots. And those were red boots, by the way. You can't see them in black and white. But, they wanted me to kind of embolden and be the power of Texas. And so that's how I was raised, and that's what I did. Let's go to the next slide, because I'm going to talk to you about why I chose cowgirls at all to even talk about in my book. I went to the Cowgirl Museum in Fort Worth, Texas. And if you ever have a chance to go there, I highly recommend a visit to the Cowgirl Museum. It is not a barn with hay bales and, old fences around it. It is a beautiful modern museum that spotlights women that may have been forgotten had they not really put them in the limelight. And I'll tell you a little about some of these in these pictures, but I love the little words that are on the left. And this is in my book, and this was something that we were able to design, this little word pictogram, but it's the words that we can all live by. A cowgirl is fearless. It takes a lot to be fearless. Independent, clever, focused, hardworking, visionary, dedicated, admired, original, natural spirited, confident, skillful. All those words are so great. Trustworthy, dauntless, resourceful. Wow, I mean, if anyone could describe me with any of those words or phrases, I would be honored. But that's words to live by. And that's what these cowgirls really gave us. Let me give you a little brief overview of the ones that are pictured here. The upper left photograph is one of Sonora Carver. And she was actually depicted in a movie, Wild Hearts Can't Be Broken, that Disney did a number of years ago. But she was a stunt woman in a rodeo type traveling show. And she had a horse, and they would jump off this big pier into a small pool of water. And it was quite the show. And so she did this. But what no one really realized is in the first year that she was performing this stunt, one day she was a little off balance on horseback, and she went into the pool of water with her eyes wide open. And when she did, both of her retina became detached and she became legally blind. Now, her husband knew this and a few close family friends, but no one really realized that she was blind. And she continued to perform this stunt for 11 years after being blind. She lived to be the ripe old age of like 92. She was an amazing woman, very courageous, but went on through adversity. You know, it didn't let her stop. She never stopped her. And the fact that she was never going to be able to see again was just not going to put her down. And then the woman to the upper right is Annie Oakley. She was the very first international female superstar from the United States. And we think about women superstars now, and you know, some of the performers and all those women that are out there, everything from Madonna to Beyonce and on and on. But you know, it's this type of woman who was out there traveling in the late 1800s when it wasn't necessarily easy for a woman to travel around the world. And she went all over the world performing before kings and queens. And you can see that she was one of the most decorated and probably the best sharpshooter in the world in her day. But she learned that because she had to. Why do you think she was such a good sharpswoman or sharpshooter? It's because as a child, she was at a farm in Ohio, and they were dirt poor. They lived on a little farm, and she went out into the woods to shoot critters, as she called them, to feed the family. And she got really good at it. And her father wasn't around a lot, and there was a lot of kids in the family, and she just took everybody on at a young age. Before too long, she had become so good at what she was doing that she would take excess meat to the market in the little village and sell it. And as time went on, by the time she was 15 years old, she had paid off the family farm and was really running it at 15 years old. Now, that is a businesswoman, not just a sharpshooter. And then she became a show person. I mean, what an amazing story. Annie Oakley is well known to a lot of us, but she was quite the role model, really, of someone who's resilient, tough, confident, all the things that we expect, and a business person, too. The other two women, just as strong, just as interesting. They, again, show people. And what I love about them is that they were always reinventing themselves. Because you think about it, when you're out there doing the rodeos, doing the Wild West shows, all the things they performed in and did and competed against men, by the way, you had to come up with new tricks. You know, we always laugh about, was that just a one-trick pony? Well, no, they were always perfecting their performances, their costumes, everything they had to do to delight an audience. And sometimes I think, gosh, when you get up in the morning, you get up, put on your makeup, you put on your clothes, and you get out there, and who are we going to delight? Who are we going to turn on to being the best that they can be? And that's what these women did. So that's why I highlighted them in the book. Okay, they can come down now, Stephanie. All right, so one of the things that I love to talk about, and then we're not going to do slides to this, I'm just going to talk to you. The path to success is not a straight line. Now, all of us who are strategic and all of us who like to plan do that, and that is a good thing. We plan ahead, and that's an awesome thing to do. What do we need to be doing in 5 years? What do we need to be doing in this quarter to make our goals? What do we need to do to move our teams forward? Planning is a great thing. And we need to put it down, and we need to put it all out there so that we have a measurement tool to see how we're doing. However, what I've learned through the years is that many times our plans get thrown off course because life has a tendency of coming at you. I call it like a pinball machine. It'll just knock you in the head and knock you around. And all of a sudden your plans are off, the strategies are off, things change, and you're not able to do the things that you thought you were going to do because life threw a curveball at you. And it can be a lot of things. I mean, it can be a change in business, a change in economy, the death of a loved one. I mean, there's just many, many things that come at us that or unexpected many times and throw us off our game. But I have found almost every time that has happened that when I do get thrown off my game, there was a reason. And when I come back to focus, I come back to where I need to be, I'm probably smarter, more resilient, and a little bit more interested in how to change the game a bit to be better than what I had even dreamed of or put down on a piece of paper as a strategic plan. So don't always worry about, when those things happen. In fact, I think we're going to show you a slide that I've just recently found that I really like. I want you all to think about this too. She hit a bump in the road so big, she had to make a detour. That unexpected turn started her on her next big adventure. Now, every bump in the road just makes her smile. So we can look at those bumps in the road as adversity. It's a bad thing. And sometimes they're painful. Like I said, they're not always easy bumps. But maybe that's the time when you're going to start a new adventure, because we get caught in ruts sometimes. Let's be honest. We get comfortable. We don't like change. And we get kind of set in our ways and in a rut. And then maybe life throws this pinball at you and you go, wow, it's a bump in the road. It's a change. But maybe that's the beginning of a new adventure. And if I look at it that way, then I'm ready for that next big thing. As I said, I love talking about Myers-Briggs. I love talking about strengths, personalities, strengths and weaknesses. And, those are a really great thing to grasp. And I know that most of you have taken Myers-Briggs or some kind of strengths finders or something. But as long as you're really grappling with and understanding what your true strengths are, you will be much more successful. And that's because you're going to focus on the things you do well. And then you build teams around you and have other people shore up your weaknesses and do the things that you do not do well. Because all of us do things well, and all of us have things that we do not do so well. And I'm going to quote you another Howard Hendricks quote, because this is very important to this conversation now. But he says, your strengths develop your confidence. And isn't that the truth? When we're strong at something, it builds our confidence. We're more competent. We're able to stand up and say what we believe because our strengths led us to confidence. But your weaknesses develop your faith. And you can call it faith, you can call it your resilience, you can call it that deep down what it takes, grit to get through things. And our weaknesses do show us that. But the good news is it's okay. We all have weaknesses. And so how do we take those and use them to have other people do those great things for us and build these strong teams where we all come together and everybody is focused on what they do best. And we have a diversity in that thought. So that's one of the things that I'm very keen on these days. We have a lot of discussions about diversity, and there's many forms of diversity. It's on everyone's lips, on everyone's spreadsheets, on everyone's goals. How are we going to diversify? How are we going to be more diverse as an organization, in our workforce and everything we do? And it's a good conversation to have, because it's real easy to hire people or put people around you that look just like you and act just like you and think just like you. And so if that's the case, then how are we ever going to get those breakthroughs of innovation and ideas if we're all thinking the same and looking the same? So one of my big issues around diversity is diversity of thought. And that's when I say when we build these teams, we need to bring in people that think differently than we do. And so I use Myers-Briggs. There's other ways to do this, but I would be very cautious when building a team if I had too many extroverts or too many intuitive types, too many feelers. You've got to mix it up. And when you do that, people are going to think differently and they're going to come in with ideas or challenge. And that's okay. We need to be challenged in our thinking. And you need to create an environment where it's okay to disagree and challenge and have those discussions, because from that will come the very best thinking, because someone's going to be poking at something in a different way than you do. And when they do, they're going to open up, wow, I didn't think about that. And so those are the great things of diversity that I want everyone to add into your diversity thinking, is let's have diversity of thought on our teams and everywhere we go, because that's where we get to the best. And I'm going to give you a little advice for working moms. I don't know how many of you are moms or have friends who are moms. It is tough. And I will not say it is not. There is no such thing as work-life balance. I'm sure many people have told you that. It's sometimes you're all on at work, sometimes it's all on at home. And, there's just, life doesn't work like that. It's not like we can perfectly balance everything and keep everybody happy, because it doesn't really happen that way. But it's okay, because we have to be in the place we have to be at any given time. And everyone starts to understand that. My kids do understand that. I mean, I have grown adult children now, and they all look back on what I was doing when I was growing my business, and I included them. And so I always say, you know what? Don't separate your work from your family. You don't have to give them the nitty gritty details, but when you're sitting around and they're talking about what happened at school, or they're talking about what happened, in the baseball team, you may say, well, you know what? We got a new client today, or we had an opportunity to meet someone else, or this is what happened, or I'm going to get a really big budget from this account this year. And that may mean that we're going to go on a better vacation. And those kinds of things. Or I might say, wow, this was a tough day. I had to deal with some difficult people, and here's what we had to do about it. And every time I did that, my kids grew, and they learned so much from that. And so just think about, what can you share with your children, or with your nieces, nephews, other people around you that are younger, that you might be able to give them some tips that will help them cope in the challenges they have as they're going through school and life. The other thing too is that Paradigm for Parody, I've heard you talk about that, is near and dear to my heart. I was one of the founders of that. And one of the things that I have been beating the drum on for years, almost 30 years, is that I had a challenge a number of years ago with some of my working mothers. I was growing my business. I only had 35 employees at the time. We grew to over 250. But at the time, there were only 35 of us. And each person was very strategic in their role, believe me. And ironically, I had 4 women who were working on our biggest account, Dell Computer Corporation, who got pregnant about the same time. I never knew why that happened. It was the strangest phenomenon. And I always laugh and look back and say, was there an ice storm that year that I missed? Or why did this happen? But they did. And so I was just puzzled on what I was going to do, because I was afraid they wouldn't come back to work. This was a long time ago. This was like 28 years ago. And so had they not come back to work, I would have been in kind of dire straits, because they were leaders on that team. And so I came up with this crazy idea. I said, look, just bring the babies up here. And they looked at me like I had lost my mind and there was no way. And I said, let's try it. And so one by one, they agreed to do this. And so we created this, what I called the romper room, and they brought the babies up there. And from that was born this wonderful idea that we ended up calling later T3 and under. My company was T3, and so we called it T3 and under for the little kids that came. And they all kind of knew by 9 months they would need to leave. It just kind of happened, and we wrote a policy, and we ended up with over 115 children that came through that program. Men brought their children, so dads participated, moms, and everyone in the organization helped take care of these little kids. And I promise you, it built our culture in a way that you would not believe. And I'm hoping, because of COVID and because of the way we're thinking about working now, that we'll be a little more creative in how to help out our working moms and dads, because we don't want to lose you. We don't want to lose people, because it's so hard, to deal with the kids and all the stresses of all that. And once you're out of the workforce and you miss that beat, it's hard to get back on the track. And so I always say, if you can hang in there, do it, because it is very, very important to your long-term financial ability to earn money. It's very important to your strategy in your career. So don't leave if you can hang in there, because it is very, very important in the long run. I have another concept that I'm going to throw out at you, and I don't know if any of you have ever really heard of this. It's called the adjacent possible. The adjacent possible is a concept that was actually created out of a biologist. And he was studying many, many years ago how, one amoeba, one thing will belong to another, and then it makes something else and it forms something else, and how in biology things build on each other. And so then it was used kind of as an analogy for sometimes business things. And I love this, because when you think about it, nothing is born from absolute nothing. Nothing from nothing is nothing, right? If there is something already there and you build on it, you're going to have much greater successes. And one of the most simple examples I can give you of this is that the printing press did not come out of nowhere. It came because of a wine press. And someone figured out the way the wine press worked could actually become a printing press. And so it was just one idea, one innovation that led to another. And so when I talk about your strengths, I also talk about superpowers. And I think about, what were you good at as a child? What were you really great at? And then that becomes the adjacent possible of what you're probably going to be good at all through your life. And think about what you do well now. How do you build on that? What's the adjacent possible? As a child, I was an artist. Literally, at 3 and 4 years old, my mother put me in her little kindergarten classroom. She was a kindergarten teacher and equipped me with crayons and inks and paints and a little easel. And I started painting when I was 3 and 4 years old. And today you can say I'm in my gallery. I've returned to my roots as an artist in the past few years and have had a very successful run as an artist and had a one-woman show in New York. Now, how would that have happened? Well, I was an artist as a child and I was just building on something I was already good at. I love to be in plays. And I was a speaker as a little kid. I was up doing debate class and all the things in high school. And so for me to morph into a person who would lead a team and be able to speak in front of them is not that unusual, really, because I was training to do that all my life. Didn't realize where it was going. So think about what you were good at as a child and then adjacent possible, because you're probably already almost there to the next big thing. I think about it now. What am I going to do next? And how do I continue, as I said, these cowgirls did, to reinvent myself? And we have to think about that. As part of our brands, who are we? How do people perceive us? How do you want to be reinvented enough that you stay interesting? People like to be around people who are interesting and have new projects or new ideas. And so think about how you can keep yourself invigorated, interesting, and it's all around the adjacent possible. We talked a little bit earlier about risk. And, I was many, many years ago just new at starting a business. This was in 1989. And that's when I started my little company with a $16,000 cashed in IRA. That's all the money I had to start my business. We were all broke because it was during a recession. And so I was just telling everybody I was eating risk for breakfast. I mean, day in, day out was a big risk to even get up and survive. And so I was visiting my mother-in-law at her South Texas ranch, and I spied this little enamel box that was on one of her tables in the living room, and it said, "Everything is sweetened by risk." And there it is. There's a little box. I've had it on my desk ever since, because that afternoon when I was leaving, she said, "I want you to have this. I've seen you look at it." And she said, "Keep taking those risks, Gay. You're going to be successful." And those were the kinds of cheerleading words and inspiration that I needed at that time. And we all need to be kind of reminded that if you don't take a risk every now and then, you're going to miss out on the sweet stuff. And I never had anyone say it to me quite that way, but isn't that an interesting way to look at it? So speaking of risk, many years ago, we started working with Dell Computer Corporation. And this was in 1992 when Dell was small and we were small. I was at that time, trying to run this agency, trying to grow it. And here came Dell, and they were just the Wild West. I mean, we were doing everything from millions of catalogs a month to the very, very first online advertising campaigns. And we grew with Dell and they grew with us. In fact, this is a funny Dell catalog. We were always experimenting with what to put on the cover. And believe it or not, that's me a million years ago. And I was cheap talent, to be honest. But, we were always looking for ways to grow that Dell business. And so I learned a concept from Dell, and it was, how are we going to scale this thing? And we used to talk about that at every meeting at Dell. How do we take this campaign? How do we sell more computers? How do we sell more laptops? How are we going to scale this business? So I learned to be, my mantra is, how was I going to scale my business? And how was I going to continue to take the risk to grow? Because without growth, we kind of die on the vine. And I always say that if you're going to grow a business, you have to grow almost 40% a year, because in any given year, you can lose 20% of your business from no fault of your own. And that doesn't always happen, and hopefully it doesn't. But you have to prepare that you're going to lose some business every year because of change in clients, change in economy, change in, it's a recession. Lots of things can happen that will take away from your business. So you've always got to be thinking about building and scaling to get to the next level. So here I was running with Dell. We grew it to be a major piece of our business. Now, advice step number 233 from Gay Gaddis: never let one client be too big of the puzzle. And when I say that, I looked at my pie chart every month to see what contribution each of our clients was making to our overall bottom line. This account 20%, UPS 5%, Dell, 52%. And it stayed like that. And I couldn't change it no matter how hard I tried to build around it and grow other clients. Dell just kept growing and scaling. And so they kept being the elephant in the room every financial meeting I had. So we let it happen though, because we kept doing exciting new things and we were growing our digital expertise in spades. I mean, we were top digital agency. I mean, Forrester Research named us one of the top innovation agencies in the world. My little company in the top 5 in the digital space. So we were letting Dell run the show. One day, there was a change of guard. And like I said, someday you're going to lose business. They hired a new chief marketing officer, and he decided that he was going to make a change and wanted to hire just one agency to run the whole thing. So he told me one day, you're the only thing not broken in this puzzle. So you're going to stay, but you have to sell to this big agency. And I vehemently disagreed and said, we will not sell under any circumstances. And I lost the business that day because he challenged me that if I didn't sell the business, we had to resign. So I resigned the business that day. Now, ladies, let me tell you what that meant. $70 million in business walked out the door that day. They thought it would kill me and that we would implode and go out of business. Now, we did have 3 months to work through our last work with them, but 3 months was not very long to make up for a $70 million loss. I laugh, you see my hair is dark there, it looks blonde today. My hair turned white in like 3 days. I'm not kidding, or a week. Seriously, gray hair started coming out. I was so stressed out, so upset because I was feared for the first time I was going to lose my business. And I mean, really lose it, not just a client, but I mean, the major 52% of our business. My team came together. We went out and pitched business. I called everyone in my network I had ever known in my life and said, I've got a great team here. Is there any work that we can start doing for you? And because, thank goodness, and the good part of Dell is we were digital experts. And I could take what we learned at Dell that had proven results and walk into Allstate, walk into Chase Bank, corporate, not just Chase local, corporate Chase in New York, walk into Marriott corporate. We picked up so much business and we actually replaced all that business by year end. Now, that is a miracle, and I don't want to ever go through it again, but I will tell you, it was the wildest thing that's ever happened. But it showed me that through resilience and teamwork and confidence that you can do something, and just sheer determination and a network of people. That's why your network's so important. Everyone you've ever met can someday be a part of something that helps you succeed when you need it most. And so that was the Dell story, but I don't want to do it again. I wouldn't want to repeat it, but I will say that it's one of the toughest things I've ever been through, but we did it and we survived. And it taught me right then that there's almost no challenge that you can't meet. Just like I told you, that woman who had the bump in the road. Yeah, that was a big bump in the road. That wasn't a bump. That was a mountain in my road. And somehow, though, our next new adventure started and we expanded our clients into some of the best in the country. So, it's tough when we go through these things, but sometimes that's what gets us to a place we need to be. Embrace change, I say. And we always said at T3, embrace ambiguity, because that's what we have to live in. We never know exactly what's going to happen next. And you can be very confident of one thing, and that's things are going to change. So even though we don't like it, it will. One thing I also want to talk about this morning is to understand the money. That's just a real simple phrase I use to say, boy, get your head around the numbers. One thing I did, and when I told you about my pie chart and I looked at that 52% Dell, I looked at my numbers all the time. That wasn't just a shock to me when that happened. I knew exactly what their contribution was. I always knew all my numbers, my business numbers. Every week I sat down with our controller and CFO, and we went through every dollar we had, everything that was owed to us, any outstanding issues, all those things. And I kept my head around the money. And so because of it, now this wouldn't happen, I don't think today, probably wouldn't happen, but we were able to bootstrap that business for 30 years. I never borrowed any money because I had my eye on the bottom line every week. And so if we needed to make a change or do something, we could act quickly enough before we would be in a hurt position where, as bad as Dell was, even we could always try to make mid-course corrections so that we were able to make a profit and able to move forward. So I just invite all of you to think about, if you're already in a financial position, that's great. But if you're not, what really makes your company tick? What's going to make the cash register ring? How is your CEO compensated? Now, when you know that, they're compensated on results. They're compensated on bottom line. They're compensated on how the stock is doing, if that's the case you're in. So, how are you going to be a contributor to that? And when you put yourself right in the middle of how money's being made and you understand it, or you're a contributor, I mean, dead on contributor to that, you become invaluable. And that's when you have more power. And when I'm saying power, I don't mean wicked power down from the top. I'm saying power to move from within, power to be successful, power to have more flexibility if you need it, and to negotiate things that you want for bigger salary, for more staff, for a new opportunity. You have negotiation power because you are a contributor and understand what makes a business work. And if you don't know the money, start working on it right now, because it is one of the most important things that you can do in your career, is to be absolutely right in the middle of how dollars are made, how your team is compensated, how everything works together. Even if it's giant business units, how do those come together? And how do they contribute to the bottom line that you can be a part of and be a big contributor for? So that's my biggest advice of the day. Know the money. Well, now we're kind of going to shift a little bit here. One of the things that is so interesting to me right now is what's happened during COVID. I'm a big extrovert. I guess that's no surprise to any of you, but I worked my business because I was there and I could feel, the culture. I could feel the mantra of what was going on the minute I walked in the door every day. And I liked having my team around me. And even though we had offices around the country, I'd go visit them. I was on the phone with them because I wanted to get the heartbeat of what was going on in my company every day. Because if I could see that things were moving one direction or another, I could probably do something fairly quickly to correct that if it wasn't going well, or if teams weren't motivated, or if they were discouraged, or if they were really happy about something and had something great to share. Man, we pushed it out there. But not only did we push out in front of the whole team, the whole staff, the successes, but we kind of had to throw out the failures too. And fortunately, we didn't have that many, but we did have some big ones. And so instead of beating up on the people who did it and calling out blame, we would just say, guess what? There was a reason this happened. And let's get it out there. Let's all dissect it. Let's look at it and learn from it. Because if we can learn from the fact that we made a mistake here or this failed, we won't do it again, I hope, or we'll do something better next time. So, all those things that were kind of happening along the way, the good, the bad, and the ugly, we just laid it out there so that everyone could learn and emulate. And when I said it's not so much what you do, but what others do because of what you do, those are the kinds of examples that we have to set as leaders. We want to say, it's okay. Let's celebrate the good and the bad. Let's get it out there. And then we'll all learn from it and people will emulate that. And they'll go back on their teams and do the same thing, because everything doesn't bubble up to the CEO or to the C-suite. So every day people are problem solving and doing things. And if you can do that with your own teams, it's kind of like, okay, this didn't go the way we wanted it to. Why not? Let's take it apart. Hey, how would you have done that better? What could we have done to make it a better situation for us so that we could have won in this and not been losing in this time? Or, like I said, if people on your team are excelling and they're celebrate them, and everyone else follows that. People want to emulate what's being celebrated and rewarded. So I'd always say, we'll watch and people will follow along and be very influenced by what is lifted up and rewarded in your organization, on your teams, and in your company. So as we go back to the office, though, as some people do and some people don't, I wrote an article about this because, as I said, I'm a big extrovert. And the extroverts are leading the way back into the office buildings. They want to be back. They love it. They cannot stand it if they're starved from their teams, if they're not getting around people, because that's where their energy comes from. And extroverts get energy from being around other people. Now, on the opposite side of the spectrum are our friends, the introverts, and they get more energy from within, that peaceful time, that quiet time they have. So for many introverts, being able to stay home more and not having to be bombarded and interrupted by the extroverts has given them a better work style for themselves, and they feel more comfortable with that. So if they're coming back to the office and they need to, we need them, or as we engage more, we're going to have to pay attention to the introverts, because they need to be encouraged to be a part of it and their voice heard, and the way their work style is just different. And so I've always looked around and said, what introvert in the room am I missing their thinking? Because they're deep thinkers. They think before they say. And many of us who are extroverts just think out loud, as we say. And it's true. You know, a lot of times, to be honest with you, I will form an opinion by just talking out loud. And I'm not even sure. I mean, I have an opinion, but I'm not sure exactly where it's going until I talk through it out loud. And then all of a sudden I go, yeah, that makes sense. An introvert wouldn't do that. They're going to think it through internally and then speak. But we need those voices. We need their opinions. And a lot of times in a meeting, I would watch the introverts just sit there and the extroverts take over. And I would make sure after the meeting, I would say, okay, Joan and Jeffrey, I would like for you to write down everything you heard in this meeting, and then you can come back to us, because I know that you're not, you know, you're an introvert. I know that you don't think out loud sometimes, but I know you've got good thinking on this, and we don't want to miss out on your diversity of thought. So I would say, go back, write it down in a day, come back and tell us what you think. I have a funny story about that. Many years ago, I was leading a count team before I started my own business, and we had a client who was very extroverted, very verbose, and he blew in the office one day and wanted to talk about an annual report that he had to get done. And so I brought in one of our best copywriters, a person who could write the copy. That's what we call them in the ad business, copywriters. And she sat down at the table and he began to talk. And he talked and he talked and he pontificated and bloviated and carried on as he always did. And about halfway through the meeting, he said, Gay, can I talk to you? And he took me outside in the hallway. And he said, who is that woman in there that you brought in to work with me? I said, well, she's a really good writer. And he said, no, she's not. She has not said a word. She has not asked a question. She's the stupidest person I've ever been in a meeting. I said, Tom, listen, she is not the stupidest person. She's extremely bright. And I want you, let's finish the meeting and let's see what happens. So he reluctantly went back in the meeting, kept carrying on. Finally, the meeting was over. She had taken copious notes, was listening intently. He left the meeting. 3 days later, she came back. We had the meeting with him and she had nailed it. I mean, he couldn't have done a better job with anyone else. He admired her for that. But on the other hand, I have to tell you, after he left the first time in the meeting, she said, who is that asshole? She said, all he does is talk. He didn't ask me a question. And she said, he is a jerk. I don't want to work with him. And I said, Mary, just go do your thing, write it up, and then we'll get back together. Once we got together, once they compared notes and she had nailed it, his respect for her went through the roof. And we all had a great working relationship for several years after that. And they respected each other, laughed, and understood each other's differences. And at that point, I got both of them to take the Myers-Briggs. I said, look, can't you see why you're different? And so it opened up an opportunity to have a great working relationship with, you know, some people that may not have ever worked together before. So that's another thing too, is if you're building teams and you're noticing things like that, maybe you have to guide people along to appreciate their differences. And there are the other differences, as I mentioned, diversity of ethnicity, of where your backgrounds are, the education levels, all those things. Bring it together and let people appreciate why someone's coming at something from a different perspective. And you'll always get better thinking and a much more innovative environment. And we're always looking for innovation. You know, that was kind of what I would always strive for. What are we going to do next? How do we get ahead of the client? And many, many times, what made my company stand apart and stay competitive. Now, if you're in a competitive situation with any of your competitors, why would someone continue to hire you? Why do they want to pick up the phone? Why do they want to send you the email that says, this is what I need from you? It's because you are thinking ahead for them, bringing them new ideas, bringing them things they hadn't thought of before. And that is what sets you apart and keeps you competitive. There's many other things that keep you competitive, but I always found, especially in my business, the biggest competitive edge we had was the innovation that we would bring. And sometimes our clients weren't ready for it. You know, we'd come in and say, what about this or this? But many times they go, wow, let's give it a try. You know, and we were first to market with so many things. I'll give you a quick example. We're working with Microsoft, and this is way back in the day when, I don't know if you remember how online ads were everywhere. You know, people don't put up with them anymore and they became out of vogue, and there's other ways to advertise and influence people these days. But it was called a skyscraper ad. And so there was a skyscraper that went down the side of your screen, and it was an ad while you were looking up something or working, and it would pop up, and there it was, a skyscraper. We said, and we talked to one of the publishers, and publishers meaning, the ones that served at the media, like Forbes or whoever. And we said, is it possible that if we did a header on the top and the skyscraper on the side, that we could make the two talk to each other? Meaning this header would start interacting with the skyscraper on the side. And they said, no, that's never been done. We said, but wouldn't it be cool? Because it really makes this product sing. It really makes this work. So we worked together, and through their technology folks, my creative folks, our technology folks and software engineers, we made it happen. And no one had done this before. Now, that took determination. It took courage. It took the ability to maybe fail a few times, as we did. And, it was just one of those things that if you didn't come out there and give it that try and put the best people on the team together, you never get to that first to market kind of idea. So every time we could do that, that was what we were kind of hallmark for. What do we bring first to market? What can we do to set our clients apart from everybody else and help them become competitive? Because when you help your customer, your client be competitive, and when they're winning and when their bottom line is good, you're good. And that goes back to knowing the money. So yes, know the money in your own organization. When you think about your clients and your customers, how are they making money? Are you helping them? Are you helping them be a successful business? I always got my entire teams. If you were working on the UPS business, you needed to listen into those calls when the stocks were being discussed. Those quarterly reports, you need to look at those. You need to look at the annual reports and get your head around the business units and what's going on at UPS. That's how we crossed into different lines of business at UPS, because our people would start to pay attention to what was going on in the healthcare division. So UPS has a very robust business where they have to transport certain things in the healthcare industry, has to be temperature controlled, has to have timing around it. There's a lot of logistics that goes around how to do that. And my team got their head around it, and we ended up picking up that piece of the business. It wasn't given to us. We went in and said, we can help you with this. So I'm just saying that knowing the money, being competitive, it's really what it's all about. And you helping your customer, you helping your own business. And when you do that, the sky is the limit. I really think that you have great opportunity to grow and grow and grow. Excuse me. And so kind of what I'm saying is to, let's step up now. Now's a good time. It's a great time for women. I'm doing a program right now at the University of Texas in Austin. It's called Women Who Mean Business. And the point of the program is to equip women who have 10 plus years of experience to get to that next big level. What is it going to take to get you out of the job you're in and into that promotion, new responsibility? We talk about how to take on P&L responsibility. That goes back to knowing the money. How are you going to get there? If you have the tools and the confidence and the courage and the support from people around you, from other women a lot of times, then you can step up to that next big role. And I'm very happy that our program is very successful. And we have graduated about 80 so far. Our next class starts in September. If anyone's ever interested, let me know. It's taught with another woman, Lynn Utter, who's a corporate giant. She was wonderful in the corporate world, and I'm an entrepreneur. So we bring two different perspectives to it. But we're teaching people the basic tools of, gosh, I can do it, and how to do it. So we need women now, and this is the time. We need all of you to say, okay, as tough as it is with trying to deal with family issues and all the things I have, I want to dedicate myself to being leaders, because if we don't have women in the pipeline and women in the leadership roles, our voices aren't going to be heard. And all the work that so many women who've come before you gets lost. And we don't want that. We're saying it's time for women to really step up. And we need all of you to do that, just to keep the faith going, and to provide a pathway for your daughters and nieces and young women coming along. And anything you can do to shine a light for them is really your mission in life at some point. What have you done to bring up the others? And I'm not against bring up the young men either. Believe me, there's a lot of wonderful, talented men out there, and we need to bring up all of our teams. But particularly, I think as women, we need to say, this is our time. And it kind of is, because companies are being a little bit more open-minded. There's more women in the boardroom paradigm for parodies out there. I mean, people are starting to pay more attention and not just lip service. And for years, a lot of times, and still, I will tell you, I'm the only woman in the room, the first woman to get this award, the first woman to do that. But I'm glad, because if I can say I did it, I'm out there, then come behind me, come along.